So, well, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for letting us speak. I can speak a bit louder as well.
There's also a mic.
Is there a mic? Thank you. Good. Then everyone can hear. Can you hear me? Okay. Hey. Hey. Yes. Hey. Is everyone having a good evening? I feel like we need to just warm up, everyone. Say hey. Hey. Say hey. Hey. Okay, good. So, I'm gonna apparently repeat some of the things you said, but paradigm shift. An important change that happens when the unusual way of thinking about or doing something is replaced by a new and different way. Paradigm. It can be easy for us to lose hope when we witness and experience the power of colonial violence in all of its varieties. White supremacy has no chill. It murders in Congo, it murders in Brazil, it murders in the Mediterranean Sea, it murders in Yemen, in New Zealand, in Vietnam. It shows its face in the alt-right 4chan generation identitaire, on the job, at the bus, in the supermarket, in families, when needing a place to live, when the Danish military scare those imprisoned in Sjælsmark with ammunition and the sound of gunshots. And as the lesbian Jamaican poet Stacian Chin said, and while we stand here, well-dressed and rejoicing, in India, in China, in South America, a small child cuts the cloth to construct you that new shirt, that new shoe, and old imperialism held upright by the misuse of impoverished lives. We state that the government's recent proclamation of a paradigm shift is not a paradigm shift. There is no change. There's paradigm continuity. This is the paradigm same old, same old. It is the ever same paradigm of colonialism and capitalism, and we have known it for centuries. It is not new to be placed in camps, to be stripped of the right to work, the right to food, to choose your own clothes, to have nothing guaranteed. To view this as a shift only makes sense if one sees the world through the white eyes of Christian Ball. Those who have not seen how Denmark and the West have thrown bombs, commodified and kidnapped children, committed genocide and enslavement. If there's something which is made clear, it is that what has been happening in the colonies has come home once more. But if we all agree on the basis of the diagnosis, what do we do now? Shift. The shift has already begun. And to remember this, we have to briefly stop talking about them and remind each other about us. There's an important shift that is happening. It is in us. It is around us. Migrant and racialized communities have for decades organized against injustice. In this country, Filipino migrant workers have since the 1960s organized against their precarious livelihoods, being under the constant whim of white rich families. Similarly, other groups, Pakistani workers, Yugoslav migrants, Inuit, Greenlandic peoples, Thai migrants, Somali communities, Kurdish, etc., have organized themselves in this country. We have organized ourselves in different ways in order to support communities at home through remittances, for survival and demanded changes, big and small. We've been subject to integration and assimilation and often hoped that this would offer a solution, even if coming at a great cost. We've also been organized along national lines, sometimes losing sight of how national borders are the very problem we need to fight. And all too often, those fighting for bigger structural changes have been lonely souls exiled to the margins because they spoke of a pain too real to bear, a reality too difficult to face. When we look around, we also see something different, or perhaps not different, but the marginal radical dreams are returning back to our collective consciousness. We cannot be saved by Denmark or any state, by any company, business, well-intended billionaire, politician, nuclear family, or white lover. We see the movement towards the creation of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color-centered coalitions with aims of creating new forms of communities that are bigger than the nation states whose stamps we are forced to carry. We see communities that address colorism, anti-blackness, Islamophobia, adoptee justice, queer and trans liberation, indigenous justice, intergenerational justice, abolition of borders and capitalism. We see how visions of another future, one in which we can breathe, are ever so often appearing on the horizon. We hope that soon it will be all that we see. But to get there, we got to keep asking ourselves some questions. How do we connect across generations? How do we make sure that our anti-racist movement doesn't become the next hashtag that you can sell on a t-shirt? How do we make sure that it isn't about individuals who can earn money off the struggle? How do those outside the asylum center make sure that we create sustainable structures that are capable of fighting for justice for those imprisoned in Sjælsmark, Ellebæk, Kærshovedgård, and onwards? Because an exhausted movement cannot abolish deportation centers, and it cannot be individual souls alone doing the work. How do we make sure our own communities stop accepting the premise of border regimes? How do we prevent the lives of women, queer, and trans folks from being marginalized in the struggle? And how do we ensure that women, queer, and trans lives don't become excuses for bumming, sanctioning, or further exploiting the countries all diasporic folks are part of? How do we expand? How do we sustain? How do we lift each other up? How do we learn to organize with intention? What shall we do to remind each other of the fact that we once too believed in the lies of the system? Every paradigm has its limits. The question is, how do we create alternatives? How do we limit the power of the colonial capitalist reality? And how do we abolish it, make it inoperative, and create something better? As the great Black revolutionary Fanon said, we must leave our dreams and abandon our old beliefs and friendships of the time before life began. Let us waste no time in sterile litanies and nauseating mimicry. Leave this Europe where they are never done talking of man, yet murder men everywhere they find them, at the corner of every one of their own streets, in all corners of the globe. If we wish to live up to our people's expectations, we must seek the response elsewhere than in Europe. If we want justice, we must settle for nothing else. Have a good evening.